What happens when a man from another world, carrying a secret no one can see and power no one can explain, decides to carve his own kingdom out of the most dangerous patch of land on the continent? That is exactly what Luren Lee Horn came here to do, and the wasteland had no idea what was coming. Start with a rock, a dead piece of grass, and a rabbit that had no business feeding 3 grown men. That was Luren's situation on the road to Lotham. Half a month into a journey that smelled about as good as it sounds. His right-hand man, Marco, built like a small fortress and armored to match, was busy hand-feeding soybeans to the horses like they were his children. The man would genuinely die for those horses, and everyone in the group knew it. Then came Ed, Cass, and Tom, strolling back from what the group quietly agreed to never discuss in polite conversation. Bandits had been jumping them for weeks. Taking care of it meant exactly what it sounds like. Luren handed them the rabbit. 1 rabbit, for 3 men built like wardrobes. They looked at it, looked at each other, and said nothing. Smart boys. Marco announced they were about an hour from Lotham, and Luren almost felt something suspiciously close to tears. Half a month of dust, rocks, and smelling like something that died twice. Civilization, finally. Now, Lotham was not just a city. It started life as a massive military fortress designed to keep the orcs from stomping humanity. Flat, big walls, arrow towers, the full package of you shall not pass built into stone and iron. But then humanity got organized. Kicked the orcs so hard they fled to a frozen wasteland called Garish. And suddenly the fortress had no enemies left to stop. Between Lotham and Orc territory sat a massive stretch of wild land that Emperor Philip III, in his infinite dramatic flair, called the jewel at the Empire's feet. He told every brave knight to go claim it, so they named it the Jewel Wasteland. Sounds glamorous. Most of the knights who went became fertilizer for the local weeds. Still, Lotham became the nerve center for supply runs, trade deals, and every flavor of shady business the North had to offer. Former military fortress turned frontier shopping mall. Classic. They got into the city, found an inn, and Luren haggled with the owner like his life depended on it. 5 people, 3 rooms. He got his own room. Leadership has its privileges. After eating actual food, real food, not sadness rabbit, he gathered everyone and started handing out assignments. Cass and Tom, collect intel on the Jewel Wasteland. Get a map. Everything from the south has passed through too many mouths to be reliable. Ed and Marco, hit the markets. Food, weapons, slaves. Figure out prices. Do not get scammed. Then Luren drained his canteen and told them he was heading to the Herald's Hall to register his land claim. Today, no delays. The Herald's Hall was the kind of place designed to remind you how poor you were just by existing near it. 12 steps of polished granite, magical beast carvings on the railings, a griffin-knight statue of Emperor Philip I standing in the courtyard, like he owned everything, which he basically did. Luren had rehearsed this scene the entire walkover. Snooty servant, insulting look, dramatic reveal of the gold-trimmed appointment letter, maybe a table flip. Instead, a perfectly polite servant walked up with a warm smile and said, "Good day, my lord. How may I help you?" Luren stared at this man, swallowed his disappointment, and pulled out the letter. "Luren Horn, here to claim my territory." The servant bowed. "Right this way, Baron." No drama, no table flipping, just a smiling old man waiting in a chair inside, who introduced himself like they were at a tea party. "Hello there, young man. I'm William Marshall." And that was where the new life officially began. Now, before going further, context matters. In this empire, pioneer knights are the people who volunteer to tame wild dangerous lands for glory and a fancy title. They have been doing it for centuries, hacking through jungles and deserts like landscapers from hell. Most start at the rank of knight. Luren walked in holding a Baron appointment letter. The gap between knight and Baron is like the gap between working at a startup and owning the startup. Most knights never cross it, but William Marshall had not greeted him personally because of the title. He had greeted him because of the name, Horn. The Horn family are a big deal down south. They backed the right emperor during a power struggle, climbed from a small viscount house to a full marquis family with their own knight order. That made southern tribes nervous just hearing the name. And Luren, he was the family's dirty little secret, the bastard son. His father Pedro Horn was the firstborn heir. His mother was, according to family gossip, a witch, which honestly explained a lot. Pedro and his mother were genuinely in love. Pedro funded Luren's education, got him tutors. built him a life. Then Pedro had to ruin everything by being an adventure junkie. When Luren was 14, his father and mother snuck off to explore ancient ruins like teenagers sneaking out of the house. "We'll be right back," they probably said. They were never right back. Gone. Just gone. And just like that, Luren's life went from comfortable bastard son to everyone's favorite target. At 16, he mysteriously fell into the water. The word mysteriously doing a lot of heavy lifting there. His father's legitimate wife came from another powerful family. Her son had reasons to prefer Luren not exist. Pedro's two brothers felt similarly. He had a waiting list of people who wanted him dead. Luckily, the family patriarch, Grandpa Conrad, happened to be walking by and fished him out, then basically sent him home with a good luck that went unsaid. Luren spent 3 days in bed with a fever, and that is when things got strange, because that is when the real Luren showed up. A soul from a completely different world, a place called Earth, took over this body like someone stealing a rental car. And he did not come alone. He brought a system with him. Kill things, gain experience, level up, except in this world. The things killed back, after absorbing the original Luren's memories and doing the math on how many relatives wanted him dead. The decision was simple: get out. He joined the army, 5 years in the Imperial Southern Legion, specifically the Falcon Corps, working his way up to Centurion at Drambo Outpost. Drambo was the most exposed, most dangerous post on the entire border. The kind of place they send you when they either trust you completely or want you gone quietly. But here was the secret weapon, the system. Every sword swing, every push-up, every physical effort fed experience points straight into his progression. While other soldiers hit their ceiling and stayed there, Luren just kept climbing. At 21, he went back to the Horn Estate, walked up to Grandpa Conrad, and got a private meeting nobody else was allowed to witness. The next day, in front of the entire family, he signed away inheritance rights he technically never had as a bastard, and received his Baron Pioneer appointment letter in exchange. Most Southern nobles figured the old man felt guilty and threw him a bone. A few smarter ones suspected Horn family influence was being planted in the north. Luren did not care either way. He had his ticket out. Back in the present, sitting across from William Marshall, honorary count, former vice commander of the Southern Legion at one of Emperor Philip V's inner circle. Luren had actually seen this man once before, at a military rally. From so far across the field that only his system-enhanced eyesight caught the face. William cut the small talk fast. "Military men don't do circles," he said. Then he dropped a quiet bomb. "When I was younger," he said, "I owed old Conrad a favor. He sent word asking me to look after you." He paused, stared straight into Luren's eyes like he was reading something written behind them. And when Luren did not flinch, William simply asked, "So tell me, what do you need?" Luren turned on the waterworks. Poor little bastard, lost parents young. Joined the army just to eat, risking his neck every day. William's eyes started twitching. He was getting annoyed fast. So Luren sped it up. 5,000 gold coins, 1,000 slaves, 500 steel swords, 100 knight lances, 100 sets of armor, 50 sets, 20. Come on, I cannot go lower than that. William looked at him the way you look at someone who just asked you to buy them the moon. Enough. You are a baron now. Stop acting like a barracks hustler and show some noble dignity. Noble dignity, right? Because dignity pays for swords and feeds soldiers. Luren nodded along like a good boy. Then William destroyed him. "Don't tell me you're broke. I know all about the famous Drambo military merchant. You think I don't know you were running a side business out of your outpost?" Luren smiled awkwardly. What else could he do? William offered discounts at the United Trading Company. Generous. But what came next was better. He walked to the giant map of the Jewel Wasteland on the wall and said something. That made Luren's brain explode with quiet joy. Normally, Pioneer Knights don't choose their territory. I'm making an exception. You pick your land. Make it a bit bigger than usual. Luren had walked in with a bag of bribe money, and this old man just handed him a blank check. William pointed to a safe spot near Lotham. Good resources, water, minerals, easy supply lines. Luren was not interested. Too close to Lotham meant too much oversight. Too many neighboring territories meant too many powerful families breathing down his neck. He looked deeper into the map, way deeper, into the parts covered in question marks and skull symbols. "Hot pick here," he said, drawing a circle in the middle of nowhere. William stared at the spot for a long moment. Are you sure you're not brain damaged, kid? Prez is not a good choice. You sure about that? Luren was sure. William shrugged, let him have it, then went one step further. Normally, new pioneer knights faced a 1-year probation before being officially recognized as nobles. Inspectors, paperwork, the works. William skipped all of that. Registered Luren as a fully recognized baron of the empire on the spot. No probation, no inspectors. AVIP passed straight through imperial bureaucracy. And when he walked into the United Trading Company next, the manager was practically bowing. William had made a call, everything purchased, discounted 30%. Luren reached into thin air and pulled his money bag from the spatial storage ring on his finger. The manager's eyes went wide for half a second, then spotted the ring, then started connecting dots. Spatial equipment. No wonder the Count is backing this kid. Let him think whatever he wanted. It only worked in Luren's favor. Things were falling into place, but the real work had not even begun. That evening, back at the inn, Luren gathered his men and spread out the map William had let him copy. Cass went first. Boss, the Jewel Wasteland is basically what we already knew. Jackals, goblins, half-orcs, bandits with names like One Eye and Fierce Wolf. Big merchant caravans that will rob you if they think they can get away with it. Our group can cross the wasteland fine. Holding the territory this big is going to be tough. Then Ed hit him with the price list. Regular male slaves, 1 gold coin. Female, 50 silver. Skilled workers, highway robbery. A carpenter or mason ran 15 gold. A blacksmith, 30. Veteran soldiers went for 5 to 10 gold each. Elite fighters, around 30. Nobody was selling anyone who could use battle aura. Luren was still crunching numbers in his head the next morning, when someone started hammering on his door before he could even get out of bed. Marco was standing there with what could only be described as a bear disguised as a human being. Boss, Ragnar's here. And there he was, Ragnar. Big, beautiful, terrifying. Built like someone had stacked refrigerators on top of each other and taught them to smile. Boss, smooth trip. Nobody wants to mess with Vikings, especially not 36 of them. The Vikings lived on a cluster of islands on the empire's eastern coast. Every single one of them born into fighting. They did not farm. They did not trade. They raided merchant ships for a living. Their islands were surrounded by razor-sharp reefs and psychotic currents. So the empire never bothered trying to conquer them. Not worth a headache. Instead, the empire occasionally hired them as mercenaries, which was how Ragnar ended up under Luren's command during his military days. They walked into the inn's courtyard, and Luren stopped for a moment. 35 Viking warriors scattered around like a convention of giants, some sitting cross-legged, some leaning on weapons, all of them laughing in voices that could shake glass. Their skin was that dark reddish-brown you only get from years of sun and salt water. Beards everywhere, gold, red, brown, braided, decorated with copper rings and animal bones. Their equipment, though, tragic. Leather armor that looked like it had been through a meat grinder. Weapons with chipped edges. Clubs with worn smooth spikes that were basically fancy sticks at this point. One word summed up these mighty warriors. Broke. Luren stepped into the middle of the giants. Gentlemen, I'm Ragnar's boss, Luren Lee Hornk. Quick note on the Lee. He had added it when registering at the Herald's Hall, in noble circles. Adding a new surname signals distance from the original family. A small memorial to a previous life nobody here would ever know about. I'm Ragnar's boss, which makes me your boss. Follow me, you get booze, meat, and women. All you need to do is remember 3 things. He kicked Ragnar out of his way, literally kicked him, then walked to the center of the group. 1, obey. 2, obey. 3, obey. Dead silence. 35 massive Vikings staring down at him like a yapping chihuahua had wandered into a wolf. Then, Ragnar tried to step in. Marco grabbed his arm and shook his head. The old crew knew what was coming. All right then, Luren said, grinning. I hear you Vikings have a tradition. Whoever's the toughest is the boss. So let's fight. Beat me and I'll give each of you 100 gold coins as travel compensation. Lose and you work for me. No complaints. A tall Viking stepped forward immediately. His name was Kobe. Ragnar, I can't beat you, but I can't beat this little potato either. Little potato. Luren stopped walking. His mouth curled into a very specific smile. Every single one of his old soldiers saw that smile and collectively thought, oh no, here we go. Back in the Falcon Corps, everyone knew that the Centurion of Drambo Outpost was the pettiest man alive. Just ask the supply officers who woke up naked and tied to the flagpole at 3 in the morning. They headed to Lotham's arena. Morning, so the place was empty. Just a sleepy attendant who nearly had a heart attack watching a small army of giants walk toward him. The arena manager was short, fat, and had the friendliest face you had ever seen, until he saw the Vikings. Then those tiny eyes lit up like lanterns. He sidled up to Luren and whispered, "My lord, any interest in selling these warriors to the arena? I'll give you an excellent price. Hard pass. I just need to borrow your arena for a bit." They did the ridiculous back and forth where Luren tried to pay and the manager refused. The man wasn't stupid. Making friends with a pioneer baron was worth more than a rental fee. Classic. Meanwhile, the Vikings watched this whole exchange and became even more convinced Luren was a joke. Kobe was actually thinking about going easy so he wouldn't hurt him and make things awkward for Ragnar, sweet summer child. Kobe and Luren walked to the center of the arena. Bare hands, Kobe tossed his axe aside, and that was when the fun started. What happened in that arena was, and this is said with complete humility, an absolute massacre. A one-sided beatdown so brutal it should have come with a parental advisory warning. The funny part, it was the small guy doing the beating. Kobe came in with those big meaty Viking hands, probably planning to grab Luren like a teddy bear and squeeze until something popped. Luren sidestepped him like he was moving through water, then punched him in the gut. One punch. This mountain of a man dropped to his knees like someone had unplugged him, wheezing, gasping, clutching his stomach, reconsidering every life choice. Luren crouched down to eye level, which required crouching, because even on his knees, Kobe was enormous. With his most punchable smirk, Luren silently mouthed little words at him. Now here is something worth knowing. If anyone could see his stats, they would notice a particular skill. Taunt, level 25. That was not an accident. He is a professional at making people lose their minds. And it worked. Kobe's eyes went blood red. His muscles swelled up like someone was inflating him with a bicycle pump. Veins popped across his body like angry snakes. Skin turned dark crimson. He started roaring like a wounded bear. Over on the sidelines, Marco nudged Ragnar. "Is he a berserker?" Ragnar shook his head. "Nah, the boss just pissed him off." Ed casually walked over to the arena manager and said, "You might want to get a priest ready." So there was Kobe, fully berserk, bulked up like a balloon animal made of pure rage. And Luren was holding both his wrists. This 2.5-meter Viking berserker was thrashing with everything he had. Luren was holding him like a parent restraining a toddler, having a meltdown at the grocery store. Then Luren let go of the left wrist, grabbed the right arm with both hands, dropped his weight, and swung. He picked up this giant Viking, a man who probably weighed 3 times as much, and whipped him through the air like a sack of angry potatoes. He slammed into the ground so hard a cloud of sand exploded upward, and the whole arena shook. Did Luren stop there? Of course not. Swing left, slam, right, slam, left again, slam, slam, slam. Over and over like he was beating a rug, except the rug was a 200-kilogram Viking and the floor was packed dirt. After about 15 rounds, he finally let go. Kobe lay in the sand like a discarded action figure. The rage had drained out completely. The only sign he was still alive was a faint wheeze from his crumpled body. The arena manager was flailing his stubby arms screaming for a priest, his voice shaking with excitement because apparently watching someone ragdoll a berserker Viking with bare hands was the most thrilling thing he had seen in his career. And here is the crazy part. After the priest healed him up, Kobe was back on his feet like nothing happened. Vikings are basically made of rubber. After the Kobe incident, all 35 Vikings became the most obedient soldiers you have ever seen. When Luren stood over Kobe's crumpled body and yelled, "Anyone else?" every single one of them shook their heads so fast their braids nearly flew off. As they were leaving the arena, Luren pulled the arena manager aside. "Want to make a deal? Anything. My lord, if any Vikings ever get sold to your arena, men, women, kids, doesn't matter. Buy them and resell them to me. Name your price." The manager thought he was insane. Plenty of people had tried to tame Vikings before. Every single one had failed. The problem was not that Vikings weren't good fighters. The problem was the berserker rage. One Viking goes berserk, you have a manageable situation. A group of Vikings goes berserk, you have an extinction event. The manager smiled and agreed, but his eyes said dreamer. That was fine. Luren liked proving people wrong. Next stop, the Southeast Commercial District. weapons, armor, grain, tools. Ed had scouted out a place called Copper Furnace Flame, the most famous weapon shop in Lotham, run by dwarves. Inside, dwarves hammered at anvils while drinking. Nothing says authentic craftsmanship like blacksmithing under the influence. While the Vikings gawked at the merchandise like kids in a candy store, a small green figure approached. "How may I help you, gentlemen?" One Viking whispered, except Vikings don't whisper. His whisper was a normal person's shout. The whole shop heard him call the shopkeeper a goblin. "That's a gnome, you idiot," Ragnar hissed. The gnome adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses with the most dignified possible expression. "No offense taken, a common mistake." Luren kicked the Viking who said it and apologized. "Sorry about that. My men are Vikings, basically cavemen with axes." He looked at this elegant little green businessman, then looked back at his herd of unwashed barbarians touching everything like tourists at a museum, and genuinely considered drowning them all in the nearest river. "I need to equip these savages," he told the gnome. "Good quality only. Cheap stuff won't survive their first Tuesday." The gnome recommended double-bladed battle axes, chainmail, and refined steel throughout, then rattled off the total with a beautiful smile. 5,760 gold coins. "Thank you for your patronage." Luren's face froze. His brain short-circuited. It was not that he could not pay. Technically he had the money, but spending everything on Viking cosplay on day 3 was not going to happen. He swallowed his pride. Only 10 sets of chainmail, the rest get leather armor. The gnome did not even blink, just started clicking the abacus again, each little click stabbing directly into Luren's wallet soul. Final total, 2,666 gold coins. "Thank you for your patronage." Same beautiful smile. They didn't have everything in stock. The gnome promised the rest in 2 days and shut down the discount request cold. No discounts. Not even for nobility. Dwarven craftsmanship does not do sales. Respect. After weapons came clothes, 40-something people, to outfits each, to pairs of boots. 5 gold coins total. Military spending is an absolute scam. Then he fed them. Watching Vikings eat is like watching a natural disaster happen to a buffet. And after that, he made them take baths. Oh, the drama. Vikings live on saltwater islands. Fresh water is scarce. They bathe in seawater, which means they basically do not bathe. They protested. They grumbled. They looked at the bathhouse like they were being led to execution. But then they remembered what happened to Kobe, and suddenly everyone became very enthusiastic about personal hygiene. Amazing how a good beating improves cooperation. Clean and dressed in fresh clothes, Luren marched his crew to the slave market. They must have been quite a sight. Him at the front, 36 freshly scrubbed Vikings stomping behind him like a gang from a Hong Kong crime film. People literally scattered out of their way. At the slave market, he got straight to business. 200 adult male slaves, 50 adult females, 5 carpenters, 5 blacksmiths, 3 masons to tailors. How much? They haggled. He pulled out his baron certificate, hoping the title would scare out a discount. It did not. A baron apparently does not carry enough intimidation for the slave trade underworld. They settled on 520 gold. Then Luren added one condition. "I want slaves with families. If they have elderly parents or kids, I am taking those too. Old people at 5 copper each. Children under 5 years old, also 5 copper." The trader's eyes lit up like Christmas had arrived early. Old people and children were dead weight. They ate food, but couldn't work. Some traders disposed of them after selling the adults. Luren was offering to buy the garbage. He was the greatest customer in history. Then Ed came back from inspecting the stock and whispered something. "You've got beast folk slaves back there. Interesting." They turned out not to be the feared Green Lion tribe. They were mastiff folk, a dog-headed subspecies who had spent centuries being persecuted, simply for looking too much like orc royalty. Their whole history was, "You look like the royals, so we hate you. Go farm dirt. If things get bad, everyone goes to prison." Centuries of punishment for having the wrong face. It reminded Luren of some Earth history he would rather not dwell on. He bought all 20, 5 gold per mastiff, 100 total. That evening back at the inn, 41 people took over the entire first floor. The Vikings attacked the dining hall like it was a military objective. Barrels drained, plates emptied. The innkeeper abandoned his counter to help the overwhelmed servers. Luren sat there watching the carnage, feeling each plate of food punch another hole in his money bag. This is what bankruptcy feels like, he thought. Delicious, noisy bankruptcy. Then the front door swung open and everything shifted. First came a soldier in light armor, about 30, scar on his left cheek, hand resting on his sword, eyes scanning the room like a man paid to notice things. Behind him, a golden-haired young man no older than 25. Handsome face, blue eyes, dark brown hunting outfit, a rapier at his waist. He moved with the casual confidence of someone who had never worried about money or been punched in the face. Behind him, to bodyguards, an archer, a priest, to chainmail knights. 7 people walking into a room full of 36 silent Vikings. The room went dead quiet. The barbarian stared. The newcomer stared back. Then the golden young man addressed the room. Would Baron Luren Lehorn please identify himself? I am Lon Hawk, and I have come to pay my respects. Luren did not stand up. He picked up his ale, raised it in a casual salute, and said, "Good evening, Sir Hawk." The bodyguards looked like they wanted to handle that disrespect personally. Lon waved them down. Smart kid. He sat across from Luren. The boys gave up their seats and drifted toward the Vikings. Lon commented that Luren's manners were more northern than southern, informal, a bit rough around the edges. He said it like a compliment. The wasteland natives don't care about etiquette, Luren replied. They respect blades and fire. Wouldn't you agree, Frost Hawk Lord? He knew exactly who this was. Lon Hawk, fully certified pioneer knight. His territory called Frost Hawk Domain, sitting at the northwest edge of the Jewel Wasteland. Lon agreed. The best way to deal with wasteland natives is to kill them. Then, so where's your territory, Baron? We pioneer knights should watch each other's backs. Pressborg, Luren said. That micro-expression, an eyebrow twitch, so fast you'd miss it if you blinked. Before Lon pulled on the most perfect diplomatic smile, the Baron certainly has courage. He hung on that word just one beat too long. Balanced right on the razor's edge between politeness and mockery. The sarcasm vanished as fast as it appeared, but Luren caught it. And at that exact moment, both of them were thinking the same thing. This one is going to be interesting. Here is the backstory on Lon Hawk, because it matters. The Hawk family are military nobles. Grandpa Hawk earned an earl title through battlefield glory, but remained an outsider in the north. Imagine moving to a neighborhood where everyone has been there for generations and they all look at you funny. That's the Hawks. Lon was the golden boy of the 4th generation. Instead of following the safe family path, he went rogue, became a pioneer knight, and actually built a functioning territory. Grandpa was so impressed, he started funding the whole operation. Rebellious grandson energy, but with family money. Must be nice. He had come to Lotham to sell minerals and report to Grandpa, planning to rest 2 days and head home. Then he heard the morning gossip. Some southern baron had beaten a Viking bare-handed at the arena. His plan was simple. Best case, befriend Luren, use him as a bridge to the Horn family. Expand the Hawk network. Worst case, make nice with a fellow pioneer knight. Because in the wasteland, friends are better than enemies. Good plan. Logical plan. But then he actually saw Luren sitting there with 36 Vikings like he owned the room. And something in Lon's noble brain went, let's mess with this guy. They sat in silence for an uncomfortably long time. 2 young nobles, neither willing to blink first. Finally, Lon broke it. I've heard the Baron is quite the warrior. My followers would love a friendly demonstration. Translation, let's fight. Oh, Luren said, I couldn't possibly fight personally. Your followers might hold back out of respect for my title. Why not let my Vikings handle it? They're simple folk, no titles to worry about. He called Ragnar over. Ragnar, Sir Hawk here wants a friendly cultural exchange through combat. You'll represent our side. Lon called his armored knight forward. Gal, you're up. And then, and this is the beautiful part, both of them behind their fighters' backs secretly made the exact same hand signal to their guys. Hit him as hard as you can. Friendship first, their faces said. Demolish him, their hands said. Since it was night, they fought in the street outside the inn. Nothing says civilized nobility like organizing a street brawl after dinner. Ragnar grabbed one of the brand new double-bladed axes, still had that new weapon smell. No armor. Gal pulled a broadsword off his horse. Luren flipped a copper coin. It hit the ground and both men launched at each other. Ragnar's axe screamed through the air with the force of a small avalanche. Each chop felt like the earth was cracking. Gal had planned a horizontal sweep, but Ragnar's reach advantage reached him first. Gal had to step back and block upward. The clang that followed made everyone's teeth rattle. Those boots carved deep trenches in the packed dirt as he skidded backward from the impact. Lon and his crew looked like someone had slapped them. Ragnar was laughing, actually laughing, windmilling his axe in silver arcs through the firelight. Those hands were going numb, but the man was no pushover. In a split-second gap between swings, Golden Battle Aura lit up his sword, and he thrust at Ragnar's throat like a striking snake. Ragnar had to pull back to block. Metal sparked on impact. But Ragnar's strategy, if you can call hit really fast and never stop a strategy, proved devastating. He started swinging faster, one blow after another, non-stop, relentless, a blizzard of steel. Gal had real technique, real sword skills, but he couldn't use any of it because every time he tried to shift tactics, another axe strike came screaming in and forced him back into blocking mode. He looked like a puppet, broadsword raised overhead, catching blow after blow. Clang, clang, clang. Then Ragnar stopped, just stopped, stepped back. Those battle aura had shattered. His hands trembled uncontrollably. The tip of his broadsword scraped the cobblestones in small jerky movements, like a dying heartbeat. Blood from his split palms dripped down the blade and onto the ground. "We lose," Lon announced. He sent his followers to collect Gal. The priest healed the hands quickly, but Gol's arms kept shaking. "You can heal the wound, but the body remembers the beating." "Your Viking warrior is truly impressive," Lon said, and he meant it. He'd seen Vikings fight before. Normal Vikings were only slightly better than regular soldiers, but Ragnar was different. Massive, impossibly strong, fast, and using nothing but the most basic attacks. Then Lon said something that sounded like a compliment. "Baron Luren, now, I understand why you chose Pressborg. If all your Vikings are as strong as this one, your legend will spread across the entire Jewel Wasteland." What he was actually saying, you've got one good fighter, and you think you can survive in the deep wasteland? Luren looked at this smug pretty boy and thought, keep talking. Ragnar had not even used first Berserker mode. He had not used his second Berserker transformation either. If Lon knew about that, his perfect jaw would hit the cobblestones so hard it would crack them. But Luren said nothing, just smiled. Then came the classic noble farewell. If Baron Luren ever encounters difficulties while pioneering Pressborg, please don't hesitate to visit Frost Hawk Domain. We would be delighted to assist. Sincere and lasting friendship. Sincere, lasting friendship. Luren looked at that polished noble smile and filed it under people to be watched carefully. He let Lon go with the enthusiasm of someone waving goodbye to a door-to-door salesman. He had just arrived in the north. He did not know who was who hated who, which families were plotting against which. The last thing he needed was to pick a side in a political drama he hadn't even started watching. The plan was simple: get to the land, build walls, become a warlord nobody wanted to bother. The Luren Horn dream, be left alone. Next morning, he told the Vikings to stay at the inn and not cause trouble. To make sure they understood, he told Ragnar, if anyone goes out and causes problems, I'm not beating them, I'm beating you to death. Ragnar's goofy grin froze on his face. He swore up and down. Nobody would leave the building. The Vikings would be proper ladies. His death stare at the other 35 was so terrifying that grown warriors physically shivered. Beautiful leadership through fear. With the barbarians contained, Luren and Marco hit the town for supplies, then swung by Copper Furnace Flame to check on the remaining weapons order. Big mistake going back to that shop. That gnome was the greatest salesman in the history of any world. He started showing small accessories, useful extras, items Luren had not known existed 5 minutes ago. Before he knew it, he was buying things. He literally had to run out of the store. Cursed merchant, he yelled, stumbling into the street, clutching his deflated money bag like a wounded animal, 100% certain that if he had stayed 10 more minutes, that elegant green con artist would have cleaned him out to the last copper coin, while smiling the entire time. But because he had spent so much, Copper Furnace Flame delivered the rest of the order that same evening. The Vikings went completely feral with excitement when the axes arrived, like kids on Christmas morning. Except the kids were 2 meters tall and the presents could decapitate people. The 10 chainmail sets went to the best fighters. The master folk got the Vikings' old beaten-up gear, which was still better than nothing, recycling at its finest. Then came the rock-armored camels. The United Trading Company had initially refused to sell them, but the manager suddenly offered to at near-gift pricing. Luren suspected William Marshall had heard about the arena fight. or gotten nervous about Lon Hawk trying to recruit him. Either way, to rock-armored camels, practically free. Picture this, 8 to 10 meters long, 4.5 meters at the shoulder, covered head to tail in natural rock-hard shell plates that got even harder when the animal secreted a protective goo under threat. Despite looking like a dinosaur crossed with a tank, they were gentle as puppies. They ate any grass, even dried-out garbage grass, and could survive weeks on almost nothing. They were basically the perfect pack animal, and every army and merchant guild in the world wanted them. Wild ones had been hunted nearly to extinction. Buying those to wipe out every coin he had left. He was now officially broke. Checking dash between dash couch dash cushions dash for copper broke. His mood for the next 2 days was what you might call volcanic, but the camels were worth it. They left Lotham at dawn and headed north. The caravan loaded up, camels carrying the elderly, children and skilled workers, everyone else walking or riding the horse carts. Day 1, still civilized. Villages along the road, farmers stopping to stare, cavalry patrols. Normal. Day 2, the road started vanishing under wild grass, abandoned windmills, collapsed cottages, civilization thinning out like hair on a stressed man's head. Day 3, rotting corpses of wasteland natives, vultures circling overhead like they were running a catering service for death. Day 4 brought a surprise, a human outpost, a stone castle that had clearly given up on aesthetics entirely, crumbling battlements patched with wooden fences, guard towers leaning at angles that defied confidence, the ice wolf banner of House Snow flapping in a cold wind. He had done his homework on them. Once northern legends who had stepped on every political landmine available and lost territory, until they were down to this sad patch of wasteland. From Earl all the way down to Viscount. From a proud name to a crumbling outpost. The Viscount wasn't even home. Luren declined the steward's invitation to enter. No way was he walking a stranger's fortress with his entire supply train sitting outside. They camped near the walls and kept moving at dawn. Day 5 is when the fun started. Wasteland natives started popping up everywhere. Goblins, jackal people, half-orcs lurking in the tall grass, watching the caravan like hungry dogs watching a steak. Some crept closer. Cass unslung his longbow and casually dropped a goblins and a jackal man without breaking stride. The natives vanished back into the grass like roaches when you flipped the lights on. But they did not leave. Shadows shifted, rustling in the grass. They were gathering numbers and working up the nerve for something bigger. Luren ordered everyone into full combat gear. Even the male slaves got basic weapons, clubs. Anything pointy? Marco rode up beside him. Boss, do we attack? Luren looked at the grass, then at the slaves and the 20 massive folk still in shackles. Not yet. Not enough of them. When we put on a show, I want the audience to see something impressive. He nodded toward the slaves and the master folk. They needed to see what happened to people who threatened this group. Nothing builds obedience like watching your new boss obliterate an enemy. He was not the type for inspirational speeches about freedom and hope. He knew his strengths, and his strength was making people afraid enough to cooperate. Not pretty, but effective. Tom and Ed slipped off their horses and melted into the tall grass like ghosts, feeding him intel all afternoon. As the sun went down, he made his call. Showtime. Wagons circled around the 2 rock-armored camels. Instant fortress. All slaves went inside the ring. Men on the outer edge, women behind them. Elderly and children in the center. His 4 men, Tom, Ed, Cass, and Marco, took guard posts and slave watch. The master folk, he had Marco bring to the front row. If this was going to be a show, he wanted the right audience close enough to feel it. Then he gathered his 35 Vikings and did something he had been waiting to do for a very long time. He pulled out the book. Listen up, he said, putting on his most dramatic ancient wisdom voice. I once discovered a tome of oaths in an ancient ruin. Any warrior who pledges loyalty to me and marks this book will be reborn. Break through your limits. Shatter your ceiling. Ragnar is living proof. From his spatial storage, he produced the most beautiful piece of prop craftsmanship money could buy. A deep brown leather-bound book embossed with a sword and wheat crest. A spine made of 7 oxidized copper plates covered in mysterious runes. A cracked dark red strap holding it shut. It smelled like ancient incense. It looked like something a Tomb Raider would kill for. Step forward, write your names, pledge your loyalty. One tiny problem. Kobe scratched the back of his head. Boss, we can't write. Luren had been so focused on looking dramatic that he had completely forgotten. His audience was entirely illiterate. He walked up to Kobe and kicked him out of sheer frustration. Then use your thumbprint, idiot. One by one, the Vikings dipped their massive thumbs in ink, bellowed their names at the top of their lungs, because Vikings do not know how to do anything quietly, and slammed their prints onto the pages of his beautiful fake ancient book. Every time one stamped, Luren quietly approved their party join request in the system, because that is what this really was, a party invite, like a video game guild recruitment, except with better theatrical props. When he became squad leader at Drambo, the system had unlocked a party feature. Someone willingly accepts his leadership, agrees to fight alongside him, and they join his party. Once in, they get system benefits, experience points, level ups, the works. They could not see the system interface. Only Luren could see their stats. But the results were very real. That was how Ragnar reached second Berserker mode. Not ancient magic, not divine blessing. Just good old RPG experience grinding with a system nobody else knew existed. And the Book of O's. He had had a craftsman make it back south. Paid extra for the artificial aging, the oxidized copper, the mysterious runes, the old incense smell. All fake. Not proud of it. Actually, extremely proud of it. That book was a masterpiece of deception. Once the Vikings were in the system, he could see their progression paths. Most were tiered a Viking warrior or tier 3 raider. Ragnar sat at tier 5, spirit berserker. And because Ragnar was named Viking squad captain, the system bumped him from the regular warrior list to the hero roster. His boy got promoted to named character status. While Luren was doing all this guild management, the enemy had finally shown up. Tom and Id's scouting confirmed it. Approximately 100 jackal people, 200 goblins, and 30 half-orcs, 3 separate groups temporarily united by greed. We were the juiciest loot target they had ever seen. The half-orcs were the dangerous ones, 30 of them, well-equipped, iron weapons, proper armor, and their leader wearing actual plate armor. In the wasteland, that was practically luxury fashion. From what Tom and Ed overheard, the 3 leaders were already arguing. The half-orc commander wanted to wait for nightfall. Smart, patient, professional. Clearly the only one in the coalition with a functioning brain. The jackal chief and the goblin sorcerer wanted to attack now. Their reasoning, if they waited, bigger tribes deeper in the wasteland would hear about this caravan and come steal their prize. The half-orc commander spat on the ground in disgust. Outvoted by 2 morons. He grumbled and lined up his soldiers behind the charging mob. 330 enemies. 41 fighters on our side, an audience of slaves and master folk watching from behind the wagon wall. Perfect. The natives did not keep him waiting. The jackal people came first, howling and screaming like a pack of drunk fans charging a field, right behind them. The goblin sorcerer led to 100 stick-wielding green idiots. In the back, the half-orcs marched in actual formation, the only ones with a functioning brain cell between the 3 groups. Luren reached into his system storage and pulled out his great sword. A 2-handed monster bigger than the broadswords used by the largest soldiers in the Imperial Army. He lifted it with one hand, gave it a little twirl just to be fancy. He looked past the charging mob and focused on the half-orcs in the back. Those were the real targets. He grinned, killed them all, and he started running. The Vikings roared behind him, Ragnar leading them forward with axes raised. But Luren was faster. He hit the front line before anyone else. The first thing in his path happened to be the jackal chief, the big one with the meteor hammer. He did not even notice the man was the leader. Did not care. He swung his sword sideways like swatting a fly, and this 7-foot jackal man went flying like he had been hit by a truck. He pinwheeled through several of his own charging warriors before slamming into the dirt. He did not get up. Luren did not look back. Half-orcs, eyes on the prize. His sword was not sharp. It was a giant slab of refined steel with no edge. Just wait. When it hit something, it did not cut. It demolished. The sound it made was not a dramatic ring, but a deep heavy thud, like a wrecking ball having a bad day. Goblins who got in the way did not survive getting in the way. Arms and legs and things that should stay inside bodies went everywhere. Behind him, Ragnar and the Vikings crashed into the main enemy force like a freight train hitting a flea market. The frontline jackal people split in half. Double-bladed battle axes versus scavenged kitchen knives is not a fair fight. Any jackal man brave enough to block ended up as symmetrical pieces alongside his broken weapon. Jackal people are known across the continent as mad dogs. The bloodier things get, the crazier they fight. The smell of blood sent them into a frenzy. eyes bloodshot, fangs bared, throwing themselves at the Vikings with everything they had. It was like watching toddlers attack bodybuilders. The harder they fought, the more excited the Vikings got. The resistance just made it more fun. After chewing through the jackal people, the Vikings hit the goblins. This part cannot even be called a battle. It was comedy. The goblins took one look at what had just happened to the jackal people and immediately threw down their sticks. Some ran, some froze, some pressed their faces into the dirt and stuck their trembling green backsides in the air. The Vikings found this to be the funniest thing they had ever seen. One even slapped a goblin with the flat of his axe like a paddle, and the poor creature was so terrified it soiled itself on the spot. Several others followed suit. The smell was educational. When the goblins broke and ran, the jackal people suddenly remembered they had survival instincts too. One dropped his weapon and bolted, and then it was a chain reaction. The whole jackal army scattered in every direction. The Vikings were smart enough not to chase 300 fleeing enemies across open wasteland. Instead, they rounded up prisoners, killed the jackal people, keep the goblins alive. Luren had plans for the green ones. By the time the Viking side wound down, his side had been over for a while. He was standing with one foot on the half-orc commander's chest, surrounded by 30 half-orc corpses arranged in a lovely circle of death. The commander stared up at him with a combination of hatred and terror. That was honestly a fun combination to look at. But when Luren asked if the man spoke common, the mouth opened and blood came out instead of words. He muttered to himself, "Crap," hit him to heart, then stepped on the chest. The already cracked armor disintegrated. A wet crunch echoed across the field. Experience 50. The golden text floated up in his peripheral vision. He dragged his great sword behind him and walked back to the caravan. The whole attack had barely been a warm-up. But here is what he was actually thinking about. A territory without people is not a territory. It is expensive dirt. He did not have enough people. Fighters like today's attackers were everywhere in the wasteland. Small fries by the thousands, and deeper in, much bigger forces waited. His Vikings were incredible, but 40 fighters could not hold and develop an entire territory. That was why he had bought those 20 master folk, strong fighters with incredible noses. Perfect patrol soldiers at minimum. And that was why when he saw 200 goblins in the enemy force, his heart quietly sang. Goblins are weak. Goblins are dumb. Goblins bring sticks to axe fights, but goblins are bodies. Warm, green, employable bodies. They can dig trenches, carry supplies, build walls, and when there are enough of them, they are even halfway decent in a fight. With system buffs on top of that, even these little green clowns could potentially reach the combat level of a trained human soldier. Plus, goblins worship strength. They had just watched his Vikings turn their warriors into salsa. They had watched him turn 30 half-orcs into modern art. These goblins would follow him off a cliff. When he got back to the wagons, Ragnar had already herded the goblin prisoners into a circle, faces down in the dirt, trembling backsides pointing skyward like a field of deformed mushrooms. Every time a Viking nudged one with his boot, the goblin would shriek, roll sideways, knock over 3 others like bowling pins, and the Vikings would roar with laughter. Best entertainment in weeks. Then Ragnar held up one goblin in particular like a kid showing off a lizard he had caught. This one was old, really old. Its skin looked like a dried toad left in the sun for a century. Saggy, wrinkled, covered in brown spots. Old goblins are basically unicorns. These creatures are so stupid and self-destructive that most die young from fighting each other, or doing something breathtakingly idiotic. The only way a goblin reaches old age is if it has magic. Boss, this one can cast spells. Not very well, though. Shot off a few fireballs and ran out of juice, and he speaks common. The goblin, desperately trying to keep its balance while being shaken like a cocktail mixer, launched into the most aggressive flattery Luren had ever witnessed. Oh, magnificent and supremely powerful human warrior, I, Nick Malaloygerin, salute your glorious. Luren waved his hand. Shut it. Told Ragnar to put him down. That name was not happening. Nick, he said, that is your name now. The goblin dropped to his knees, pressed his forehead to the ground, and thanked him for the gift of a name, then looked up with a sycophantic grin that belonged to nightmares. Luren sat down in a chair Ragnar had helpfully grabbed from one of the wagons. The man reads minds sometimes. He looked down at this kneeling ancient green raisin. I do not have enough food to feed all these prisoners. You can become my slave or you can die. Pick one. Slave. Definitely slave. it would be my honor. Nick started crawling toward his boots. Ragnar punted him sideways before contact was made. Nick tumbled across the dirt, scrambled back to his knees, and pressed his face into the ground so hard it left marks. Did not even glance at Ragnar. Smart little cockroach. When Luren checked the system, Nick's party join request had popped up. But there was something extra about this goblin. Something flagged. He did not push it. Whatever the secret was, the system would tell him what he needed to know. For now he had a use for Nick. Go tell the other goblins what is happening. They work for me now. At first, give every single goblin a name. Make sure they remember it. Nick bowed until he almost folded in half, then scurried off like a little green missionary, ready to spread the gospel of do what the scary human says or die. The naming ceremony that followed was entertainment Luren did not know he needed. Nick started strong. Iron Hammer, Stone, Mushroom Head, solid, respectable names. Then the creativity kicked in. Shiny Sparkle, Gurgle Egg. Then desperation set in. Bigfoot Plate, Crooked Nose. By the time he got to the last goblin, a sorry little creature missing half an ear, he had completely run dry and simply called it Ragstrip. Total count, about 50 goblins successfully recruited. Once the moon came up, campfires were lit, and Nick had squeezed the last name out of his depleted vocabulary. It was time for phase 2. The Vikings gathered around. The 20 master folk were brought over, unchained now, none of them daring to twitch. Master folk have better eyesight than humans. They had seen everything in the battle in perfect high definition, every split skull, every exploding goblin, every half-orc swatted like a fly. Whatever pride they had had in their own fighting ability had been ground into powder. Luren sat in his chair like a king on his throne, pulled out the Book of Oaths, and delivered the same speech he had given the Vikings. He did not bother checking if the goblins understood. They understood fear. That was the only language he needed right now. Nick went first, sprinted over, dropped to his knees, sliced his thumb on a dagger, and pressed a bloody print onto the page. Budget decision. Ink costs money. Blood is free, and blood looks far more dramatic by firelight. Better for the ancient sacred oath vibe he was going for. He checked Nick's loyalty. 65. Not bad for a goblin conquered an hour ago. He smiled at him. What he thought was a warm, encouraging smile. Nick's knees buckled, and he crashed back to the ground, forehead slamming into the dirt. Loyalty jumped to 70. Apparently, his friendly smile looked like a predator sizing up lunch. Good to know. Also, goblin cowardice was literally a loyalty-generating mechanic. The more terrified they were, the more loyal they became. This species was designed for him. Stand up. Call them one by one. Now here was the problem with goblins. They all looked the same, without Nick yelling their names. He had no idea which system entry matched which goblin, so he cross-referenced by name as each one stepped up. Mushroom Head. He stopped Nick mid-call, checked the system. Loyalty 32. That was not low loyalty. That was I am going to stab you in your sleep loyalty. Ragnar. Break this goblin's legs. Throw it outside the camp. Far. Ragnar's face split into a grin that would haunt children's nightmares. He grabbed Mushroom Head by the neck, one-handed, lifted the bewildered goblin into the air. Crack. The sound of a goblin leg snapping is something you feel in your teeth. Mushroom Head screamed. Ragnar did not pause. Second leg. Crack. Then he handed the shrieking, twitching creature to another Viking like passing a bag of groceries. Throw it far. The screaming faded into the distance. Then silence. Total, absolute. Hear a pin drop silence. The campfire popped once. Nobody breathed. Human slaves stood frozen with heads down. Master folk were statues. The remaining goblin prisoners vibrated so hard the ground practically buzzed. The Vikings were completely unbothered, and for good reason. After today's battle, every single tier to Viking warrior had advanced to Tier 3 Raider. Even Kobe had jumped to tier for Berserker. They could feel the difference in their own bodies, and their loyalty scores all shot past 90. Next, the voice cut through the silence like a blade. Nick practically screamed the next name. The called goblin's legs gave out. Had to be dragged to the front by already sworn goblins. 5 goblins total got the broken legs treatment, and a one-way trip into the dark wasteland at night. In the wasteland after dark with broken legs, the local wildlife would handle the details. Final count, 50 goblins successfully recruited, and the system showed their advancement tree, hilariously complicated compared to the Vikings' straightforward path. Goblins had a warrior track and a mage track, 10 tiers and 6 tiers respectively. More tiers did not mean more power, though. A Tier 5 Goblin Brave was roughly equal to a Tier 1 Viking Hunter. The Goblins' ancestors were clearly the peasant farmers of the fantasy world, while the Vikings' ancestors were apparently the Miggets. Different bloodlines, different ceilings. The upside, Goblins needed far less experience to level up, cheap to upgrade, cheap to feed, and there were 50 of them. Quantity has a quality of its own. Nick was made official Goblin leader, and the system immediately moved him to the hero roster. His first orders: teach every Goblin basic common language during the march. Minimum requirement: understand simple commands. Any Goblin who cannot learn by the time they reach pressboard becomes dinner for the ones who can. And if half of them fail, Nick's legs visit Snap City. Nick had never been more motivated to teach in his life. Now for the Master Folk. 20 big dog-faced beast people standing there unchained, watching Luren like he was the final boss of their worst nightmare. Which, fair. One of them stepped forward, middle-aged, built like a linebacker, voice like gravel in a blender. My lord, we will pledge our loyalty, but we have one request. Luren stared at him, not a word. Just the knife made of eye contact stare he had perfected over years. The man's head drooped like a wilted flower under the pressure. Then he continued, we'll fight for you, we'll die in this wasteland for you, but if we ever face other beast folk, please allow us to sit out. We don't want to spill our own people's blood. Luren laughed. Not a warm laugh, the kind that makes nearby animals run. Where I come from, he said, loyalty that isn't absolute is absolutely not loyalty. And for people who are absolutely not loyal, there is only one option. He pointed toward the darkness outside camp where the broken-legged goblins were still screaming. Great ambient sound effects. Let me get this straight. He continued. Beast folk kill each other more than humans ever killed them. Your people have been enslaved for over 1,000 years by other beast folk, sent to the front lines as cannon fodder by other beast folk. You cannot even protect your own wives and children because of other beast folk. And now you want to tell me you will not fight beast folk because you are all one big happy family? Are you joking? He turned and pointed at his Vikings standing there, like the world's most intimidating motivational poster. I am offering you a chance, a real one. In my territory, I do not care if you are human, beast folk, or a talking mushroom. Fight for me and I protect you. He walked right up to the middle-aged master folk, close enough that the man could smell the battlefield still on him. Maybe one day I will even lead you to free your people from the ones who enslaved them. But none of that happens without absolute loyalty. So tell me, what is your choice? Was he being completely genuine? Partially, his actual thinking was strategic. No human civilians wanted to live in this wasteland. His only population options were slaves, wasteland natives, and beast folk. Natives could be broken through fear. The master folk were his long game. Treat them well, and word spreads through beast folk networks. Other oppressed clans hear about the human lord who treats them fairly. They come to him instead of him hunting them down. The master folk were a door. He was investing in the hinges. The middle-aged master folk said his name, Bell. Bell swears loyalty to you. And then all 19 others followed. One by one they knelt, cut their thumbs, pressed bloody prints onto the pages of the beautiful fake ancient book. Loyalty 60 to 65 across the board, above the passing line. They would not betray him anytime soon. Marco went to arm them with the Vikings' hand-me-down weapons, recycling at its finest. That night was peaceful. The battle had scared the local natives into silence. The only sound was the increasingly faint screaming from the darkness. Nature's lullaby. Day 2 of travel. The natives attacked again. These idiots had the memory of goldfish. They had watched hundreds of their friends get slaughtered the day before and came back for seconds. Almost impressive in its stupidity. This time Luren changed tactics. Vikings opened with a volley of throwing axes. 36 short axes spinning through the air, whistling like angry birds of death, slamming into the charging mob and ripping holes through the formation. Then the charge, Vikings first, master folk and goblins following. The result was predictable, half dead before melee even began. His goblins, hilariously, were vicious when winning. They attacked their own species with zero hesitation and absolute enthusiasm, occasionally chasing fleeing enemies into the dark grass, before Vikings had to kick them back into line. Goblins fighting a winning battle are apparently the most aggressive creatures on the planet. Goblins fighting a losing battle are the most cowardly. There is no middle setting with these little green psychopaths. The master folk, though, were disappointing, except for Bell. They were terrible. Centuries of oppression had beaten the fight out of them. On the battlefield they flinched at everything. When they did swing their weapons, they held back like they felt guilty about hurting things. Their natural physical stats were higher than the wasteland natives, bigger, stronger, tougher. But their combat instincts were so dead that the goblins were actually more effective fighters. Let that sink in. Goblins were outperforming them. After the battle, Luren gathered the master folk and called Ed over. Starting today, Ed is your instructor. He is going to reteach you how to fight. More importantly, he is going to teach you how to kill. Ed jumped into his role with the enthusiasm of a man who had been waiting his entire life for this exact permission. His first lesson was hands-on killing practice. He lion captured natives on their knees in front of the master folk and told them to execute the prisoners. Nobody moved. The master folk just stood there, weapons hanging at their sides, listening to the prisoners whimper. Bell stepped forward, probably to say something about mercy. Ed kicked him flat on his back and shoved a finger in his face. Shut up. Cowards don't get to have opinions. Ed demonstrated by killing the goblin prisoner himself. Quick, efficient, clinical. Then he grabbed one of the master folk, physically lifted the man's arms, and forced his hands to crush a jackal man's skull. That broke the dam. Every master folk grabbed their weapon, squeezed their eyes shut, and started swinging wildly at the prisoners in front of them. Not technique, not skill, just blind, sobbing, desperate violence. Then they collapsed on the ground, shaking and gasping. Ed did not give them a break. He stood over their crumpled bodies and immediately launched into a lecture on how to kill efficiently, where to strike, how to conserve energy, which angles minimize resistance. Was this psychologically healthy? Absolutely not. Was Luren worried about creating emotionally damaged killing machines? A little. But they were in the wasteland. Everything out here wanted to eat them. The master folk needed to become killers now. The days blurred into a routine. Walk, eat, get attacked, kill attackers, eat again, sleep, repeat. Every single day a new flavor of wasteland creature charged their caravan, as if the last batch had never happened. Goblins, jackal people, half-orcs, lizard folk. More species diversity than a nature documentary, except every species was trying to eat them. After the first few days, Luren got bored and stopped fighting personally. Handed the whole operation to Marco and Ragnar. Handle it. And they did. The human slaves went through a hilarious transformation. Day 1, screaming and hiding under wagons. Day 5, sitting calmly watching the Vikings work like it was dinner theater. Oh look, that one got split in half. Pass me the bread. Some of the braver male slaves volunteered to fight. Luren let them press their thumbs on the book, gave them weapons, and sent them out with strict orders to Ragnar to babysit them. Every human slave was money already spent. Losing one was like dropping gold in a river. Even the Vikings were getting bored. These wasteland natives had exactly one battle plan. Scream and charge. No flanking. No tactics. Just screaming and charging, getting slaughtered. And then their friends would try the exact same thing tomorrow. But you know who was having the time of their lives? The goblins. Every native attack meant more corpses, and more corpses meant more food. Nick had graduated from desperate survivor to food critic, actually ranking which native species tasted best and strategizing about which to stockpile. The goblins got their own wagon just for the meat supply, without enough salt to preserve it. The wagon started fermenting. Even in cooling weather, it smelled like a crime against nature. Nick wisely moved his entire goblin squad to the very back of the caravan, as far from Luren as physically possible. Smart goblin. He knew that bad smell plus daily attacks might push his master over the edge. Nick had one source of constant anxiety, the homework assignment. Teach every goblin basic common language, or his legs were going to Snap City. He knew how stupid his own species was. This knowledge gave him stress-eating problems, downing 3 massive slabs of roasted meat per meal just to cope. He had learned cooking from watching the human slaves, and it ruined him. Once you have had properly grilled jackal flank, you cannot go back to eating it raw. Nick had become a goblin foodie. The good news was the system was quietly making his job easier. After pressing their thumbprints on the book, the goblins were getting smarter. Not reading philosophy smart, but can remember their own named days in a row smart. For goblins, that was basically genius. Level. The ones who fought in battles improved even faster, learning common quicker, fighting harder, growing taller. The goblins in particular had already hit tier for Goblin Warrior. Nick could not see the system, but he noticed the pattern. Fighting equals getting stronger and smarter. So he implemented the greatest incentive program in Goblin history: fight bravely. All you can eat roasted meat. Genius. Nick controlled the entire goblin food supply. And as the only goblin who could cast fire magic, he had a monopoly on the most desirable commodity in goblin society. The battlefield results were immediate and hilarious every time they engaged natives. The Vikings would charge in with axes, and suddenly there would be these little green blurs zooming past their ankles, shrieking war cries, diving headfirst into the enemy. The Vikings had to start watching where they swung because these tiny green kamikazes kept getting underfoot. All 50 goblins advanced to Tier 3 Great Goblin. 15 of the bravest hit tier for Goblin Warrior, noticeably taller and stronger than the rest. Nick went to Marco and requested 15 spears. Marco shrugged and agreed, with Luren's approval. Nick got spears, scavenged weapons from dead natives, and 15 semi-intact leather armor sets from the junk pile. Nick was so happy he nearly cried. He had an elite squad now, 15 armored, spear-wielding goblin warriors, in battle. Nick led these 15 directly behind the Vikings while the regular goblins swarmed behind them, cleaning up kills like little green vultures. Nick was living his best life. He had troops. He had strategy. He was a commander. For the language project, he took Marco's advice and integrated goblins into the caravan's daily work. Alongside the human slaves, learned common through actual conversation, not drills. Good goblins got roasted meat. Lazy goblins got to watch others eat roasted meat. Soon the caravan looked like the weirdest workplace in history. Human slaves directing goblins to carry supplies. Goblins stuttering broken common sentences. Brown campfires. Humans and goblins communicating through wild hand gestures, occasionally bursting into laughter when a goblin mispronounced something spectacular. Of course, some goblins were troublemakers. One actually bared his teeth and growled at a human slave. Nick almost had a heart attack. For the slackers, Nick sent his tier for warriors to beat them senseless. For the goblin who threatened the human, Nick went to Marco and requested a 5-meter pole. Then he personally knocked out every single one of that goblin's teeth, one by one, tap, 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 and hung the toothless screaming creature from the pole on top of a wagon. He even stuffed a rag in its mouth so the screaming would not disturb Luren's sleep. Nick the Employee of the Month. Then something unexpected happened. The human slave girl who had been threatened actually came to Nick and asked him to let the goblin down. She felt bad for it. Nick did not dare argue with a human. In his mind, any human outranked any goblin. He ordered the creature cut down. The toothless one would be drinking porridge for weeks. After that little public service announcement, every remaining goblin became the most enthusiastic co-worker imaginable, helping with laundry, learning to repair wagons, stumbling through common sentences with the determination of someone whose dental plan depended on good behavior. Nick was turning out to be a capable leader, cruel enough to maintain order, smart enough to innovate, and terrified enough of Luren to never slack off. The perfect middle manager. Everything was going smoothly. Then Marco rode up after yet another routine slaughter and said, "Boss, something feels off." And Marco was right. Even the dumbest creatures on the continent should have figured out by now that attacking this caravan was suicide with extra steps. But these natives kept coming every single day, sometimes twice, morning attack, evening attack, and the attacks were strange, only 100 or to each time. They would charge screaming like they meant business, bounce off the Vikings like ping-pong balls off concrete, drop a few corpses, and run away somehow 3 times faster than they charged. This was not stupidity. This was strategy. "Someone is watching us," Luren said, squinting into the wasteland. "They are using these natives as expendable pawns, wearing us down, testing our responses." Classic exhaustion tactics. Spread the mass of folk around the caravan as scouts. Next attack. Let the natives get close before engaging. Goblins go first. Mass of folk flank from the sides. He spat on the ground. Whoever said wasteland natives are brainless clearly never met these ones. Fine. Let's see who blinks first. The new strategy worked. By letting natives get close before springing the trap, the mass of folk could cut off retreat routes, and thanks to Ed's horrifying boot camp, they had finally unlocked something primal. They were faster than the Vikings now. When panicking natives scattered in every direction, the mass of folk ran them down like wolves chasing rabbits. For the first time in over a week, Luren actually got a full night's sleep. But here is what he did not know was happening about a day's march away from the caravan. For half-orcs were sitting around a campfire on a hilltop having a meeting about how to murder him. These were not the discount half-orcs from the first battle. These were the real deal. The scarred one was different from the others. Bigger. A massive scar ran from his forehead diagonally across his entire face and down past his collarbone. The kind of scar that announces, I survived something that should have killed me, and I'm angry about it. Here the tactical report. To rock-armored camels, 10 wagons, roughly for 100 civilians, about 100 fighters, 36 human warriors with double-bladed axes, extremely dangerous in close combat, 20 beast folk, 50 goblins with 1 goblin mudge, no. Cavalry deployed. They throw short axes with enough force to punch through armor. Night raids made things worse. Their leader is very young and uses an absurdly large great sword with one hand. Then the fourth half-orc spoke. He wore light leather, carried a longbow and curved blade, and had a giant war jackal drooling next to him. Can you confirm they killed Na? Timeline matches. The first scout confirmed, only caravan to enter the wasteland recently. They collect corpses after every fight, which explains why they cannot find the body. The scarred giant glared at the scouts. Are you afraid? Both dropped to their knees and stared at the ground. The great blood of Ura does not tolerate cowards. He snarled, if you disgrace the name of Ura's blood, I will personally cut off your heads and offer them as sacrifice. So this was who had been pulling the strings, not just random natives. An organized half-orc tribe with a name, a legacy, and a very angry ancestor they like to invoke. The Bloody Bandits, one of the most feared factions in the entire Jewel Wasteland, and they were marching toward the caravan. The scarred leader, Margosh, turned to the archer with the giant war jackal. His name was Mark. Tomorrow you take for 100 warriors, 50 jackal riders, and every native you can round up nearby. Destroy that caravan. Mark stood and roared. Before sunset tomorrow, you will have their heads. 500 elite soldiers, 100 cavalry riding giant war jackals, plus however many cannon fodder natives they could gather overnight, coming for them in the morning. And Luren was sitting in his caravan, happily enjoying his first good night's sleep in a week, completely unaware the universe had decided his vacation was over. Tom sprinted back to him before dawn with the kind of expression that says, we are going to need a bigger boat. His report, a massive army approaching, 600 cannon fodder natives of every species. Behind them, 400 fully equipped half-orc infantry marching in rows of 50. Synchronized steps, actual military discipline, over 100 in iron plate armor. Flanking the whole force, 50 jackal riders, half-orcs mounted on mutant war jackals. This was not a raid. This was an army. Luren was not going to pretend. He felt great about this. But panic is for people without a plan. And he always had a plan. Even if sometimes that plan was make it up as you go and hope the system carries you. He ordered the caravan to halt and circle up. Wagons locked together into a wall in minutes. Women, elderly, and children climb onto the rock-armored camels, safest spot in the formation. Anything trying to reach them would have to get past several tons of angry dinosaur turtle first. Every male slave got a weapon. The ones already in the system became the core defense force. Cats climb onto a camel's back to rain arrows and command the defenders below. All 36 Vikings went to the front line. Full armor, full weapons. Their job, kill as many as possible before the wave hit the second line. Marco mounted up and joined the Vikings, fully armored on horseback. The Vikings looked at him curiously. They had ridden beside this quiet man the whole trip without ever seeing him fight. But Ragnar had told them privately, I can't beat Marco. Coming from someone who could double berserker and ragdoll half-orc squads. That statement carried serious weight. The Vikings suddenly looked at this quiet horseman with very different eyes. Second defensive line, master folk and goblins commanded by Ed. Their job was to catch anything that got past the Vikings. Specifically, the jackal riders fast enough to loop around the front line and hit the wagons directly. He deliberately did not tell the goblins how bad things were. Their eyesight was too poor to see the full army anyway. All they could make out was a big dark mass approaching, which was already scary enough. If they had known they were facing the legendary Bloody Bandits with 500 elite soldiers, there would not have been a goblin army anymore. Just 50 little green streaks running toward the horizon. Even without the details, they were shaking like leaves. every goblin trembling so hard weapons were slipping in their sweaty green hands. Nick stood in the back screaming encouragement, desperately trying to keep his troops from bolting. As a wasteland native, he recognized that blood-red banner flying above the half-orc formation. He knew exactly who these people were and what they did to their enemies. Every rational brain cell in his ancient green head was screaming, "There is no way we win this." But one tiny stubborn thought kept crawling back. What if we do? The war began. No speeches, no dramatic standoffs. The half-orcs lined up behind their wall of cannon fodder, and the fight started like someone flipped a switch. Luren pulled his great sword from storage, said nothing, and started walking. Walk became jog. Jog became sprint. But someone was faster. Marco exploded forward on horseback like a missile made of murder, his entire body wrapped in blazing blood-red battle aura, glowing like a comet streaking across the battlefield. He hit the first half-orc commander like a freight train hits a shopping cart. The half-orc had barely raised his axe before the warhorse's shoulder launched him 15 meters through the air like a green ragdoll. The second commander tried to flank, swung at Marco's side. Marco was already gone. The blade cut nothing but air and embarrassment. The twitches from the pinned commander, then nothing. What followed was less a battle and more an education in what happens when several very different kinds of terrifying converge on the same enemy at the same time. The half-orc main force tried to surround Luren. He batted aside spears, grabbed a spearman by the shaft and yanked, sending the soldier crashing into two shield-bearers like dominoes, then stepped on a fallen skull, scooped up a shield, and bulldozed forward, shield in his left hand, great sword in his right, plowing through the formation like a runaway train through a cardboard city. He was moving too fast, hitting too hard, and every half-orc who tried to plant his feet and block out launched backward into his own comrades. He was heading straight for the archers, the formation's worst nightmare. The archers dropped their bows, pulled curved swords, and charged without hesitation, brave, stupid, but brave. One horizontal sweep sent 3 archers spinning away at the waist. Shield bashes turned iron and bone into sounds nobody wants to hear again. Their curved swords hit his shield and bent into modern art sculptures. Meanwhile, Ragnar, who had finally caught up to the half-orc commander Mark, brought his battle axe down on the war jackal's skull like a divine instrument of destruction. The animal's head split open like a dropped watermelon, and the beast collapsed so fast it practically liquefied. Mark tried to fight. Ragnar's fist came down like a meteorite. Chest armor shattered. Second punch. Mark went airborne, flipped, and slammed into the dirt. Then Ragnar casually stepped on him. One massive foot planted on the commander's chest, the universal symbol for game over. Seeing their commander used as a doormat was the final straw for the half-orc army. The formation that had held through the entire battle disintegrated. Some kept fighting out of sheer stubbornness and got split in half by laughing Vikings. Others tried to run, but half-orcs are not built for speed. The Vikings chased them down one by one, battle axes catching the afternoon sun. At the rear, Ed and the master folk had transformed into something unrecognizable from the flinching creatures. Ed had started with 2 weeks ago. Bell split a jackal man's skull, took a spear to the side, roared, and opened a lizard man's throat on the backswing. A young master folk warrior got surrounded, grinned, and crushed 2 attackers with his bare hands. Ed weaved through the native mob like a dancer at the world's deadliest performance, twin blades opening throats faster than the mind could follow. And behind all of them, Nick's 50 goblins had discovered something that would change their entire self-concept as a species. They were winning. A lizard man that used to take 5 goblins to defeat, one could handle solo now. Every single goblin had advanced to tier for Goblin Warrior. Some had hit tier 5 Goblin Brave. Against this rabble of jackal people, lizard folk, dogheads, and wild goblins, they were the big kids on the playground for the first time in their miserable green lives. Where the goblins actually began pushing forward instead of backward, the wasteland natives froze. In their entire lives, they had never seen goblins run toward danger. Goblins run from things. That is the universal constant. Sun rises in the east. Water flows downhill. Goblins flee. Except these goblins were running at them with weapons raised and murder in their beady little eyes. The native's brain short-circuited. Nick nearly ran out of magic holding his position, saved only by Cass threading a perfect arrow from 300 meters away through a rider's throat at the exact moment Nick's position was about to collapse. Marco trotted over on his blood-spattered horse. Having finished mopping up the jackal riders near the goblin line, He looked at the shaking goblin mudge and said in his usual gentle voice, "Sorry about that. Those big dogs were really fast. I couldn't catch them all in time. Are you okay?" This man, who had just single-handedly massacred 20-something mounted warriors while literally dripping with enemy blood, was apologizing to a goblin for not being fast enough. Nick jumped to his feet. "Fine. Completely fine. No problems at all. Loyalty 100. With Marco joining the rear, it was over in minutes when his lance skewered a lizard man tribal chief and held the body aloft for everyone to see. The entire native coalition shattered. Weapons hit the ground. Natives ran everywhere. Many just dropped to their knees and begged. The mastiff folk stopped and stood together panting, watching the chaos wind down. The goblins did not stop. Surrender and mercy were concepts they had never encountered until Ed roared. Surrender means don't kill, and they did not dare disobey Ed. So they redirected their enthusiasm toward the natives still running. Cannot violate the don't kill surrenders rule if they haven't surrendered yet. Goblin logic. When the screaming finally stopped, only a handful of half-orcs had escaped into the wasteland. Hundreds of bodies covered the ground like the world's most disturbing carpet. Luren walked over to the crumpled half-orc commander Mark, still alive under where Ragnar's foot had been, lying in a pool of blood, staring at the sky with the vacant expression of a man whose entire worldview had just been deleted. "You speak common, right?" The unfocused eyes twitched slightly. "Good enough. So tell me, why attack us?" The math had been bothering him. These were not random hungry natives. They were organized, disciplined, well-equipped soldiers with a different kind of reason for being here. Mark grasped one word: revenge. The 30 half-orcs from the first battle, the ones whose commander Luren had accidentally hit too hard. Those were members of the Bloody Bandits, one of the biggest, most feared factions on the entire wasteland. "Whoops, the great blood of Ura will avenge us," Mark growled, though Luren could hear the despair underneath the bravado. He did not push further. He did not know enough about the wasteland's power structure to ask intelligent questions yet, and he wasn't going to look clueless in front of a dying enemy. Mark was a real warrior, fought for his people, did not beg, did not cry. That earned a clean death. Luren picked up the curved blade from the ground and finished him quickly. No torture, no drawn-out performance, just respect between fighters. Then Tom materialized next to him like a ghost. "Boss, there's another group of half-orcs, about 100 infantry and 50 jackal riders, escorting a supply convoy. 30-something heavy wagons, moving slow, about a day's march to our left." Things suddenly made sense. These half-orcs had not been on a revenge mission originally. They were escort troops guarding valuable cargo headed to a trade deal with the bandit lord, called One-Eye. They stumbled onto evidence that the caravan had killed their brothers, and the scarred commander made a snap decision. Split the force, for 100 to kill the caravan, the rest to continue the delivery. The revenge was improvised, an emotional side quest, which meant the other group had no idea their attack force had just been turned into fertilizer. Deep wagon wheel ruts in the ground meant heavy cargo, 30-plus wagons, 150 half-orc guards for escort duty. Whatever was in those wagons was valuable, and Luren was broke, completely, embarrassingly. Checking the couch cushions broke. Here, gift-trapped by fate, was a supply convoy full of unknown valuables, guarded by soldiers who did not know their reinforcements were dead. Speed was everything. If they found out what happened, they would either run or prepare. Neither option worked. Marco, Tom, Cass, with me, we're going shopping. For riders on horseback versus 150 half-orc soldiers, guarding 30-plus supply wagons. He liked those odds. Meanwhile, completely unaware that death was galloping toward him at high speed, the convoy commander Margosh was having a bad feeling. He was the scarred giant from the campfire meeting, the strongest warrior in the entire Blood of Ura tribe, and right now, his survival instincts, the ones that had kept him alive through decades of wasteland warfare, were screaming that something was very wrong. He scanned the horizon. Wagons crawling, 50 jackal riders patrolling. Everything looked normal. He briefly considered it might be the human caravan they had sent Mark to destroy. Then he laughed at himself. A few dozen humans against 400 elite warriors plus 600 natives. Mark probably had their heads on spikes by now. What Margosh did not know was that Mark was very dead, lying in a pool of blood with a curved blade through his chest, courtesy of the man now riding hard toward him. 3 black dots appeared on the horizon, moving fast, very fast. When the dots resolved into human riders, an arrow was already in the air. Margosh tilted his head on pure reflex, pure instinct, and the arrow grazed his cheekbone, missing his brain by about 2 inches. Cass, 300 meters out, first shot of the engagement, nearly decapitated the strongest warrior on the wasteland, missed by the width of a scar. The jackal riders charged out to intercept. What followed was less an engagement and more a demonstration. Cass stopped his horse and began doing what Cass did best. Methodical, mechanical, absolutely terrifying precision. Every arrow found a throat, an eye, a gap in armor. Jackal riders dropped like dominoes at a bowling alley. One shot, one kill, one shot, one kill. The rhythm was almost musical. Marco did not slow down. He accelerated into the cavalry formation like a blood-red comet. Jackal riders exploded off their mounts as he passed. Left, right, left. His lance a horizontal windshield wiper clearing the road of everything in its path. The entire Jackal rider unit dissolved in under a minute. Tom had already vanished into the chaos, doing what Tom always did, moving where no one could see him, in close where no one expected him. The convoy's rear guard began dropping, without knowing why, without hearing anything, without a single warning. Margosh fought. He was the best warrior his tribe had produced in a generation, and he fought like it, roaring, cutting, refusing to fall. But for riders who had just beaten 400 half-orc elites were not for riders anymore. They were something the wasteland had never produced on its own. They were the product of a system nobody else knew existed. Years of experience points grinding in the deadliest outpost on the southern border, and a leader who had crossed worlds and carried that other world's ruthless efficiency with him into this one. When the last of the convoy guards went down and Margosh finally dropped to one knee, breathing hard, the wagon sat silent and waiting in the wasteland afternoon. Luren walked up and looked down at the scarred half-orc giant. Whatever the tribe had scraped together over years of accumulated effort to fund that trade deal with One Eye, all of it was sitting in those 30 wagons. The blood of Yura had sent their best army and their entire treasury into the wasteland in the same week, and both of them were now his. He stood in the middle of the jewel wasteland, surrounded by wagons full of unknown value, with a small exhausted army at his back and Pressborg still ahead of him, somewhere past the question marks and skull symbols on the map. The wasteland was watching. Everything in it was still learning who had just arrived. A bastard son that no one had wanted. A soul that had crossed between worlds with nothing but a system and a refusal to stop climbing. He had come north with a letter for loyal men and an idea that a man with the right tools could turn the most dangerous patch of land on the continent into something nobody would dare threaten. In a few weeks he had turned broke into resourced, frightened goblins into soldiers, battered master folk into warriors, and the most feared bandit force in the jewel wasteland into a story people would tell around fires for years. Not because of family name, not because of title, but because of what the system let him become when nobody was watching. And what he had become was only the beginning. Pressborg was still out there, past the dead grass and the question marks, waiting for walls and people and a lord stubborn enough to build something real in a place where everything tried to stop you. Luren Lee Hornk, bastard, transmigrator, baron, warlord in training, looked at the horizon and felt something he had not felt since crossing worlds. Not relief, not pride, something quieter and more dangerous than both. Certainty. The wasteland had thrown its best at him in the first 2 weeks. 600 cannon fodder, 400 elite soldiers, cavalry, archers. A tribe with centuries of hatred and a treasury they had bled to build. And he was still walking north. The goblins were fed. The massive folk were learning to fight. The Vikings were loyal. Marco, Ed, Tom, and Cass were exactly where they had always been, right behind him. The Book of O's, beautiful, fake, and utterly effective, sat in his storage ring next to a great sword still warm from the afternoon's work. There would be more armies, more factions with old names and old grudges and the absolute certainty that one young baron with a handful of fighters could not hold what he was building. They were going to be very wrong about that, because Luren had crossed an entire world to get here. And he was not leaving without something to show for it.